Welcome to the Green Living Now podcast. I'm your host, Amy Todisco, and this podcast is your guide to true health freedom. If you're ready to feel better, boost your energy, and protect your family from hidden toxins in your food and your household products, you're in the right place. We'll cut through corporate greenwashing, expose harmful chemicals, and empower you with holistic health tools so that you can reduce or eliminate your dependence on pharmaceuticals and Western medicine and take control of your well being. It's time to create a toxin free home, master organic living, and embrace a healthier, greener life. Thanks for tuning in, and let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Green Living Now podcast. Today, we are joined by artist and longevity coach Robyn Lee, and she's going to share invaluable lessons on preventative health and emotional well-being that were inspired by her mother's journey with terrible chemical sensitivities. You'll discover how Robyn's proactive approach using holistic health strategies and green living can transform your health and your future. Stay tuned as we delve into her story of healing through holistic practices and green living. Let's get started. Robyn Lee, welcome to the Green Living Now podcast.
Thanks for having me.
My
Excited
pleasure.
to be here.
Excellent. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a lifelong artist, which you can see these are some of my hand-painted tiles
Oh,
in my
wow.
background here. I've loved science and learning how the world works. So that's been a big inspiration overall. I can nerd out on hours and hours of regreening the desert videos and,
Oh, I love that stuff.
like really, for me, one of the most exciting things is always to find where there's solutions when we
Yes.
haven't known about them. I got into promoting green building because of my tiles, and I found that green builders had so many solutions that we just didn't know about.
Yeah.
That's how I got so much into sustainability. I really started to learn about health because my mom became chemically sensitive right before I went to college. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like overnight, she couldn't eat a single thing out of the family grocery store because nothing was organic. It was really hard on the family to have to make all those changes so fast. We
Right.
throw out all the plastic in the house, and we definitely learned like that aluminum pots weren't good for you and Teflon pans.
Yes.
And so, started to cook with all glass cookware. But I decided that I wanted to really learn how to, everything that I could for prevention so that I would
Absolutely.
never have to get that drastic in what I could and couldn't eat.
I'm curious about how your mother, was she exposed to things early on? Because typically when people have that kind of a big reaction, my understanding is that they just kind of reach the maximum of their, if you imagine, the human body as a rain barrel, and every time we're exposed to toxins, it fills us up, right?
Right.
Was there something in her history where she'd been exposed to stuff that all of a sudden that was just the last straw, or how did it come
Well,
about, do you think?
part of that stress barrel is emotional
Oh,
trauma,
yes, of
right?
course.
And so it was entirely repressed, but she had a very traumatic childhood with multi-generational incest, like from every
Ooh.
male in her line.
Okay,
And
well, that would
then,
definitely serve as a lot of trauma.
right, and physical and emotional abuse from both her mother and her father.
Oh,
One of the really interesting things in a story that I like to tell that really demonstrates how much that emotional trauma is tied to illness. One of
yes.
the times when I was visiting home from college, that my mom's jaw had locked up like instantaneously from some tiny scent on my dad's clothes that nobody else could even smell, right? And
Wow.
so we drove 15 minutes to her acupuncturist, and Frida put in one needle, and my mom's jaw unlocked as fast as it had locked up. And she got a flash of a memory of being whacked in the jaw by one of her parents.
Oh, wow, that is such a powerful and visible demonstration of exactly what you're saying, of how it's not just the toxins that we're exposed to in the environment and in our products in our home and our food. It's just heartbreaking to me to think about what she went through. But isn't that amazing? With one needle, she had a flashback and she got the release.
Right. And so
Wow.
she would wind up, you know what retracing is when your
Yes.
body has to, how do you describe it? When the body has to go through the things over again as part of the healing
Right,
process.
so almost like reliving it.
Right.
Mhm.
And so she would do this. She got where her body would gain weight for a week because it knew it wasn't going to be able to eat for a week.
Oh,
She realized that one parent was right-handed and one was left-handed because which side of her jaw would blow up would be depend on which parent had hit her during the memory that was resurfacing in that healing process.
yeah,
So there was a lot of trauma that she was healing over the years, but
yeah.
that is part of how she got much better. Because a lot of people,
Interesting.
once they get chemically sensitive, it doesn't
Yes.
necessarily improve, right? If
Right.
we wound up eating chicken stew on a 4-day rotation diet because she couldn't afford to get allergic to any more things,
Oh my
you know,
goodness.
and
So
then,
when you found something that worked for her, she would eat that for 4 days?
well, she would
Or
eat
was
it
it
only once every 4 days. So
oh,
that,
once
uh,
every 4 days?
right.
Because if she ate it every day, she could become
To
yeah,
ties anything that she could eat, she would eat it
I
on a
see.
4-day rotation diet to make sure
Okay.
she wouldn't get sensitive to more things. And then as she started to get better, then she could slowly introduce more things. But one of the chemical exposures
Mhm.
was we had a gas stove in the house that we were living in at the time. And she had actually had my dad buy an electric stove, but it sat upstairs on the wooden floor for like 2 years
Oh my
until
gosh.
she actually had to have it taken out.
And just the smell of that, which maybe nobody else could smell but her, or could she even smell it?
So she actually described, and, we had a psychologist who was living next door, and she told Liba about this like 2 years after she had gotten sick.
Yeah.
That she used to stir the pot and then run to the sliding glass door and open the door and gasp for air. And when she had
Oh
enough air,
my
then she'd close the
goodness.
door and go back to cooking, and
Did anybody
but
know this in the
we
household?
didn't know. None of us
Wow.
knew. And the psychologist is like, why didn't you just call an electrician and have them
Yeah.
change the soap? But
Yeah.
it was like one of those things we don't really know. One of the things that why I have been really working hard to be able to clear out whatever emotional baggage I have
Right.
is I know that I am more sensitive to smells than other people, right?
Okay.
So like I can smell propane when
Me
nobody
too.
else can smell propane when I'm in somebody's house that has it. So to me, it's like I want to be able to reduce my chances of
Right.
having the immune system get so out of whack that,
Gotcha.
because
Well, yes,
once,
especially after you watched what your mom went through, you're being very proactive and
right.
preventative by doing that. That's fantastic. So you had help with your mom as far as figuring out what to do, or did you guys figure this all out on your own? How did you get her help?
Well, she used to lobby in the California legislature for gifted education. So
Oh,
she knew all of these amazing doctors and
right,
who were able to work with kids with all kinds of learning disabilities.
right.
There was actually a group of 8 professionals who between them could figure out, if a child had a sugar intolerance or they never learned how to cross crawl or their eyes didn't work together binocularly, they could
Oh,
figure out what every child's issue were. And once they fixed that, any child could learn. Like there
oh, that's
wasn't any
amazing.
children that they could not help to,
Okay.
get to where they could learn. And so because of my mom's knowing about all of those things,
Hmm.
she wound up self-diagnosing and she found an environmental allergist. So a combination of the environmental allergist that had access to all the different stuff that you would need to replace all the toxic items
Right.
with. That was a really big help there. And,
Yes.
she was the one who guided us through the elimination diet where you
Hmm.
eliminate all kinds of things and then you
Yes.
introduce to see. So we wound up all getting tested on what we had sensitivities
Oh,
to.
that's so
And
interesting.
it was very interesting because oranges were one of they actually made my throat sore. I'm
Oh,
like, I think
wow.
I'm doing good for myself when I get a cold and
Right,
I
like a
eat
vitamin
oranges.
C.
And it was actually aggravating my throat.
Interesting.
So that was something that we don't know a lot of times what is actually bothering us.
Right. I think that's a really important point that I want to emphasize because I think some people that are new to green living and holistic lifestyles often think, well, I don't know that my health problems are necessarily related to the food that I'm eating or the products that I'm using in my home. But your mother and others who have that extreme type of reaction are kind of like the canaries in the coal mine. And of course, as you've mentioned, it's the added extra toxins of the traumas that we all go through, some of us worse than others, that make those triggers so much more powerful. And so what would you say to people that are listening who maybe poo-poo the idea that what you eat and what you expose yourself to in your home could actually create health problems?
I would say that everything that we do,
Mhm.
everything that we eat, all the time that we're breathing, it actually can be either contributing to our health or reducing our quality of health.
Good point.
And when we start to recognize that and decide to choose cleaner options,
Yes.
doing for our health, because I've recently been trained in and certified in Ayurveda.
Oh, I love
And
Ayurveda.
that has been really interesting. And not all the things that I have thought were healthy and the best way to eat is healthy according to Ayurveda. And
Right.
so
So
that's been an interesting thing. Like
so
it's
what's an
shown that
example?
salads are good for you, right? But in Ayurveda, raw vegetables are harder to digest.
Right.
So if you don't have what they call good digestive fire, then those salads could just be turning into toxins that
Ooh.
and who knew?
I'm saying that, "Ooh," as I'm thinking about how many salads Dave and I eat. I mean, we have pretty strong digestions, but that's such an interesting point because you're absolutely right, and especially if anybody has followed the raw food diet,
Mhm.
which I dabbled in for a little while because 'cause I've tried everything, macrobiotic, vegetarian, I've never done vegan. So that's a very interesting point, but isn't it also seasonal? Aren't there certain times of year, like summer, or if you live in a warm climate, you can generally tolerate raw things, or I guess it really depends on the person, but I was thinking that there was something that I had paid attention to around seasonality of how
Mhm.
you eat your food, like in the winter when it's cold, you wanna eat things that are warm, cooked,
Right,
and if you have digestive issues, it probably doesn't change so much regardless of the weather. It's more around what's going on with that person's digestion and how can they support their system. So maybe in that case, eating salads, even in this hot summer, isn't a good idea for somebody that has some digestive difficulties or the lack
right.
of the fire, as you said.
Really an interesting thing to be able to understand what is good for your constitution in
Correct.
particular, and then how much variation can you have
Yes.
in, in the windows. I like to really be able to help people with what is like be able to do things in moderation.
Yep.
One of the things that I learned in one of our dietetics classes was one of the reasons that gluten is so bad is that one of the compounds in gluten is it triggers an enzyme that makes the lining of your gut slough off, which is
Oh,
really not good.
wow. What's that
And
enzyme? Do you remember?
I'd
Hadn't
have
heard
to
that one.
look at my notes, and I haven't investigated it yet. And she likened it to, when you're on your menstrual cycle, the lining of
Oh, the
your
shedding.
uterine sheds,
Yes,
kind of like that, but it's totally not supposed to.
but not in a good way.
Not in a good way. Your lining of your
Ooh.
gut is not supposed to slough off. And then the other thing that it does is the proteins that make up the thyroid gland look similar to gluten proteins. And so if those gluten proteins are getting past and getting into your bloodstream, and then your immune system winds up seeing those as bad and trying to take them out, that
Mm.
the immune system can get confused. And that's when it starts to attack the thyroid gland.
Wow. I want to sort of loop back a little bit to your mom. So you changed up your household. You got rid of plastic, you got rid of everything toxic. You switched from a gas stove to an electric stove. Eventually, I assume that was
Right.
implemented, right? She did acupuncture.
Hmm.
What other supportive types of practices did she use to help herself heal?
One of the big things when it comes healing the emotional stuff,
Mhm.
we found, is it called emotion code?
Oh, yes, emotion code, sure.
Yeah, so doing emotion code and EFT tapping,
Mm,
any things that can help to clear the emotional traumas
yes.
is definitely a beneficial thing, you know, and
Yeah,
being able to do it in as gentle a way
right,
as possible is good, but not always possible.
right.
It's
Right, because you
um
don't want the person to end up having to relive the trauma per se, but you want them to release that stuck emotion, energy, memory, right?
right. And with the emotion code, she could tell that it permanently released the trapped emotion
That's
around the
great.
given incident. One of the things that's very interesting living with somebody with chemical sensitivity is her overall sensitivity to everything
Mm,
was increased. And so
yeah,
she could tell very quickly, it wasn't fun for her, but it was very, very interesting to me to
yeah.
see when I would bring a healing tool or something, she could tell within seconds whether it was going to be beneficial or not beneficial.
That's amazing.
And
So it's
so
almost like what some people do with muscle testing. She didn't even have to do the muscle testing. She just had an intuitive knowing, or she had a reaction, or
she would get where, like if it was something bad, she'd get this, ooh. And then if it was something good, then she'd go, ooh.
oh,
You know?
wow. That's amazing. I wanted to just mention a cool thing about EFT, emotional freedom technique. I've actually used ChatGPT to create my own tapping script so that it's really unique to me. I gave the prompt to say to follow the style of Brad Yates, who is one of the EFT tapping people that I really like. And then I gave it like the key points that I wanted to cover. And so I do my own personalized tapping, which is kind of fun. If
Interesting.
anybody's interested in doing something like that.
For me, doing my emotional clearing, whenever I get triggered
Mhm.
by something, if I have the time, then I will go ahead and clear on it, because best time, you
That's
don't
a great
you don't
idea.
know when that's going to get triggered again.
Yes.
It's been very interesting to, when I understand that the things that trigger me, whether, and a lot of things from past lives, which I didn't
Mm,
used to have any recollection of any past lives. But I think as I dealt with the stuff from this life,
right.
then stuff from other lives, it was like it was time to deal with the
Oh, the
deeper
it's almost
layers.
like the layers came up
Right.
the surface? Interesting.
One of the things that I found is it's not like you need to remember every life. You only, the ones that come up are the ones that have unfinished,
Ah,
unresolved stuff.
yes.
Right. And then that'll be triggered by something that somebody says, or
Mhm.
my reaction will be like for
Yes.
something that was only like this. They said some little thing. And I
Yeah.
have this big, huge reaction. I'm like, what was that? Where was that from?
Yes. Yes.
And then I'll go into focus and I'll do tapping on, okay, why did this trigger me, so that I
Oh,
can
so you do
discover.
tapping as a question to get the answers as opposed to kind of reprogramming?
Yeah. So I'll tap on whatever is making it so that I'm not good at systems,
Okay.
for instance, because following systems in my business has been a challenge. And
Okay.
every time I wind up getting to a layer of, why am I sabotaging myself? then I'll wind up doing tapping. I actually do a combination of EFT and emotion code
Oh,
because
interesting.
I get different stuff when I'm
Okay.
tapping on the, so I'm doing this. It's a little bit like walking and chewing gum, but you get used to it. So I'm doing the emotion code clearing and I'm tapping, and my eyebrows will get really tight. So I know there's a lot of stuff there, and
Yeah.
there's not usually a lot of stuff here. I've added my throat point because I have a lot of stuff around not being able to speak up.
Ah,
And so I found that there's a lot of energy, emotional energy in my throat.
yeah.
So as I'm doing it, then I might ask to clear whatever is causing this level of self sabotage.
Oh, wow, that's really great. Wow. For those that don't know the emotion code, can you just briefly tell us what that is?
So the emotion code was developed by Dr. Bradley Nelson, who's a chiropractor, and he's got a chart of emotions that you can say was the trapped emotion in column A or column B, and an odd row or an even row. So you can pretty quickly determine out of this whole long list of emotions what the emotion is uh, by just, narrowing it down. Is it in this half of the list or that half of the list and then this row? And then the clearing for it is running a magnet from like your third eye down. And
And you're talking about a real physical magnet.
yes,
Okay.
and then, but we are magnetic. So I usually just use my fingers
Oh, so you can
and
just
do it like
do it with
this.
your own hand.
Hmm.
Okay.
And one of the things I thought about, the main central vertical meridian
Mm.
actually goes this way.
Oh,
And so I was thinking, well, why are you doing it this way? But then I thought, well, maybe it's undoing,
right. It's a reverse
right?
process.
When I'm putting in after I've cleared something, then I don't do that same thing. I might do tapping or other things for
Ah,
what I want to put in as
okay.
the replacement program. You don't do backwards.
Right. And that's a good point too, that once you've released something, you need to put something else better in its place to sort of fill that space. Is that true?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to, but
Right.
especially when you're releasing things that have been tied to such limiting beliefs, then it's really helpful to put in what are you wanting now that you have cleared the, cleared the
Right.
garbage. Now you get to have what do you want instead? And
Yes.
so
That's great.
it's definitely good to do that.
Awesome. So you got into longevity coaching, but you're also tell us a little bit about the whole stress and anxiety piece, because I know that's part of what the work that you do. Yes.
Yes. So I have loved any technique that only requires your two hands. So I
Ah,
learned how to do Jin Shin Jyutsu, which is basically holding 2 points.
okay.
In Jin Shin, they have something called the finger holds, where you're holding each finger until you get a rhythmic, even pulse. And that is
Oh, wow.
something you can do while you're watching TV. You can do it where you're holding the whole finger. You can hold it for about 2 minutes or until you get where you can feel a rhythmic, even pulse, and then you move to the next one. And so you can hold the whole finger or you can just cover the nail bed.
Okay.
And that makes it so that, like, when you're driving, then you can hold your steering wheel and you can be doing
Oh,
this.
oh,
And that's
neat.
one of the things that I will do to help me reduce stress when I drive.
Okay.
And
Oh, wow. Pulses. But when you're doing the pulse, you're looking to say again, you're
so it
touching
is
your own.
when it's not the finger holds, then you're almost always holding 2 points at any one time in Jinshin.
Okay.
And to me, that was much more powerful than when I learned acupressure pressing just one point.
Right.
And to me, it's like those 2 points, it's like a battery.
I
You have
agree.
to have both sides of the battery touching or you don't have any current,
Right, exactly.
right?
And the same thing with hands-on healing, like just putting your hand on can be helpful, but it's so much more powerful, I think, when there's, two hands. Like if
Right.
my dog, for example, is having a gurgly stomach, I'll put both hands on either side of her and think about that energy going from one to the other
Hmm.
through her. I agree with you with the whole kind of idea with the battery and the fact that we're magnetic too. So, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's with the finger holds, there are 144,000 flows that go through the body and they all go through the fingers. When you're
Sorry.
doing the finger holds, it's like if you're doing the whole finger, then you
Yes.
really have points all along the the finger that is
Okay.
going to be helping to balance the system. The finger holds because
Okay.
it's actually the pulse in the finger that you're holding and
Right.
wanting to get rhythmic and even as opposed to
Okay, so you're not trying to
racing.
balance it to the other hand's pulse.
No, it's just kind of, within itself, it should be like a nice, even rhythmic, like not racing,
Got
not
it.
sluggish or
Right.
sticky, you
Right.
know.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite things that I have taught for a long time. I did a Toastmaster speech on it once, and the next day
Ooh.
I saw one of the guys, and he's like, "Wow, that really works." I was a little perturbed at my son, and I did those finger holds, and it was amazing.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, so finger holds, is that one of the top things that you tend to teach people?
It has been until I found these Marma, and
Oh, yeah, so tell us about that.
I created this little pocket guide that your viewers will be able to download it. You
Yep,
print it on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and then there's another instruction thing for how to cut it and fold it into your little pocket guide. But
cool.
it has Marma, which are a specific way of doing pressure points that I learned in the Siddhaveda lineage of Ayurveda.
Okay.
And all of the points you're pressing 6 times. And in Ayurveda, when you're seeing somebody's pulse on their wrist, it's different than, a regular Western way of
Yes.
reading the pulse. There's like 6 beats and then a slight pause when you're seeing an Ayurveda pulse. And
Oh.
so when we press these 6 times on the point, I'm not sure if it's related, but to me, it's kind of like we're reminding our body what a healthy pulse is. And
Oh,
so,
that's interesting. So you have a series of these different points that your little guide tells you how to do it.
right.
And what would you say are the main outcomes if you implement those?
Well, so one of my favorite ones is the point right under the nose.
Mhm.
And this helps to oxygenate the brain, but it also helps to reduce anxiety.
Oh.
I started to do it on a regular basis, and you can do it where you're either just pressing 6 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or you can do it where you inhale and bring your finger to the point and then exhale. And that brings in a little bit of
Ah.
mindful breathing at the same time. And when I started to do that is really when I started to be able to get a handle on my anxiety. Like
Ah.
I can get where I get anxious of not knowing what to do with stuff. And I'll
Okay.
wind up just staring at this pile of stuff,
Oh,
not
interesting.
knowing what to do with it, and my brain would just go into a freeze.
Oh,
And if
interesting.
I remember to do this, then I can prevent myself from getting into that frozen state.
So as soon as you start to feel the anxiety, you do that so that it doesn't go into that sort of frozen
Right.
place. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And
Cool.
then so there's that one. One of the reasons that I created this is because when kids have autism and ADHD, doing these different points can really help them self-regulate. Dr. Naram with the Ancient Secrets, he would have kids come into his office just bouncing off the walls. And within 10 minutes, sometimes he would have them being able to sit, follow instructions. Even nonverbal kids would would go to their mom and hug them, which, like non-huggers would
That's
would
amazing.
be able to go to their mom and hug them and say, "I love you." And like completely amazing. And so I decided, because our kids, especially coming out of the pandemic, have,
Oh,
uh,
yes.
you know, really been extra challenged.
Hmm.
I created this so that I could, potentially do it with kids in schools and
Wonderful. Because I was thinking every school teacher would need one of these that she can do with her class, right? He or
well, and
she.
I'm trying to figure out how to actually get them into schools. We're in a very strange time,
Yes.
and being able to do things that are really helpful is not always
Embraced or welcomed.
embraced.
Well, which is the reason
Unfortunately.
why I think we need to do these things for ourselves. And, I think that's kind of the theme of what a lot of us, I think I'm getting
Mhm.
the sense that this is part of your theme too, is the idea of empowering ourselves to take back our health and take back our power by doing these different types of, whether it's eating organic whole foods or, cleaning out the products, doing all these different ways to first to clear yourself of trauma that you don't want to have in your life driving your behavior anymore, but also these cool techniques that can help people on a day-to-day basis so that they don't feel so vulnerable and stuck. I think that especially now, it's like every day, as we know, many crazy things happen.
Right.
So how do you stay balanced in this kind of a tumultuous, hopefully we're moving towards a better place and more people are waking up and consciousness is raising. And I try to follow that line of thinking as opposed to more of the doom and gloom stuff. But what would you say are the top things that people can do? Use your little handout that we're going to put in the show notes as number one. But what are two other things that you might recommend for people listening to do that can help them improve their life in some way?
I do wanna show one of the ones in there is called the Forgive and Let Go Marma,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's on the left hand, so left represents the past.
Okay.
So in this, the whatever you call kind of like
Like
the
that
webbing
web.
area,
Yeah.
if you kinda dig around till you find a point that is painful,
Yep.
and you're gonna press that 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can
Okay.
do that 6 sets of 6 with kind of focusing on what you're wanting to forgive or let go of,
So
and you
you
don't.
have that thought first and then you do the 6 sets of 6?
Right,
Okay.
and if you want, you can put,
Like a
if you
little
have a
window
specific.
that you're
Yeah.
imagining. Okay, that's cool. What does the word Marma mean?
I think it's probably Sanskrit for
Ah,
something like pressure point,
okay.
um, but in this particular way of doing it, we use 2 A's spell it with 2 A's at the end as opposed to 1.
Oh,
When you do a search online for
right.
Marma, there's other ways of doing it,
Okay.
but they're not necessarily as powerful. This doing it in sets of 6
I see.
is a more powerful way to do it
Cool.
than some of the other things that I've seen online.
Okay, cool. That's great to know. Okay, so we've got that, and then what are 2 other things that you might recommend?
I would say being able to manage what you eat,
Mm,
as much as I don't think you should have to be super strict about how you eat.
right.
It definitely is something that what you eat affects your mindset
Mhm.
and your overall health. If you can at least stay away from the processed foods and sugar as much as possible,
Right.
then your body can actually tell you you know, what it craves,
Yeah.
and in a good way. But if you never give it anything good, it doesn't know what good is.
Right, it's totally confused and
Right.
yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, I think it was last weekend, we had Chinese food from a local place, and I did not have the energy and the clarity in my mind the next day that I normally do. And I thought it was
Mm.
very interesting because we're not 100% eating only good stuff. I'm probably 85% organic whole food. And then we have little treats here and there. It just came to my mind that it was because I ate the Chinese food the night before.
Mhm.
And so I have to remember to kind of bless whatever I eat. It can at least give a little energy of positivity. Not that there was anything negative about the food per se, but you just never know. I mean, kitchens can be stressful, and the ingredients obviously weren't organic, or not obviously, but they were not organic.
Mm.
So yeah, that's a very powerful point about, and people don't necessarily, like I was saying earlier, they don't necessarily make the connection. But I think the more we make these changes and pay attention, the more we can get information for ourselves about what works best for us.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
And then I would say being able to be mindful about things and
Mm,
then learning how to do emotional release work of some kind.
yeah.
Because we all have stuff piled up.
Oh gosh, yes.
I think with the pandemic, the added levels of stress
Mhm.
that people wound up being under, finding ways to release stuff. One of the other things that I like to encourage people to do is the importance of being empowered with learning how the body actually works and
Mhm.
how to live in better harmony within our own home environments and within the
Yes.
greater scope of things. There's so much that I think is misunderstood
Mm,
because it's only what you hear on TV.
right,
Like
right. And so
one of
eliminating watching the news is one really good idea.
where do you actually find good alternative
Well,
information?
that's a good question. Yes.
Because my mom got sick, I learned so much, and she was a voracious reader. And
Mm.
then all the most important books she would actually give me.
Oh,
So she
wow.
gave me Kayla Daniels' book, The Whole Soy Story, because
I don't even know that.
because she had to give me soy milk when I was a baby. And she thought that was responsible for my thyroid issues because the soy
Oh,
can totally knock out your thyroid hormone. It affects all the endocrine glands, but it specifically
right.
can lead to thyroid problems.
Mm,
My mom taught me how to be proactive
yeah. What a gift.
in everything, and not wait. So, like during the pandemic, I didn't wait for whatever the government said to do or not do. I've got my whole pile of things that I take as preventive and
Yep. I'm with
all
you there.
all kinds of things because when people, well, everybody's going to get it, I'm like, well, no, I'm not following that protocol.
Exactly. And even if everybody gets it, people handle it differently depending upon their level of well-being and what they're doing to manage it. Like, both my husband and I got COVID, but it was a really mild case.
Hmm.
And I've known so many people that got vaccine after vaccine and continued to get terrible cases of COVID. I don't usually get into this topic because it's such a controversial one, but I feel like we have to start trusting our own inner knowing and obviously consult with people that you trust. But then that gets into that whole question of, well, who are the trustworthy people and who are the ones that are doing good, not trying to make money over health and all those kinds of issues that we've seen with the Western medicine system. So Robin, this has been fascinating. We could talk for hours, but I feel like we need to come to a close. So is there one thing that I didn't ask you that you wish that I had?
One of the things that I've gotten into recently is asking people if you could live with vital health and active as long as you want, how
Mhm.
long would you want to live?
Mm.
Because the scientists are saying the first person who will live to 150 has already been born. And it could be any one of us.
Right.
And But we're not going to get there with our current lifestyle, our current way of thinking.
Right.
We have to do something in order to be able to shift how we think about life, how we think about our finances. Because when I ask that question, quite often I don't actually get a, an answer of a number how long they
Oh,
want to
interesting.
live.
Yeah.
What I get is I don't want to suffer.
Yes.
I don't want to have no friends.
Yes. That's kind of where my mind went. I was like, well, I can't really come up with a year. It really depends on what the circumstances are.
In my spiritual training, in everything that I've learned, I know that we have the ability to create life how we want.
Yes.
It's just our limited thinking is what keeps us creating what we don't want or we say we
Right.
don't want,
Right.
right? And so if we actively plan for a healthy, long life, then we can actually start to make progress in that direction. One of the
Yes.
reasons that I started getting into this Ayurvedic lineage is because the masters who had passed it on had lived to some of them 125 and 145.
Wow.
And then they just leave when they decide they want to leave.
Oh, that sounds like a good way
It's
of doing
not
it.
like their health had gone downhill to a,
Right. Yep.
and so I decided, okay, maybe there's something that I need to learn from this lineage. And it's
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating how people can come out of all kinds of illnesses and be able to get
Absolutely.
better.
Absolutely.
And so I want to encourage people to dream about what they want and to be part of the the movement to create the world a better place.
Awesome. So for people that want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I've got a website, naturallivingsolutions.com, that they
Okay.
can go to be able to connect with me. And
Perfect. And then if they download the free guide, that will obviously connect them to you as well.
yes,
Cool. Awesome.
I will do a complimentary consultation with anybody who's interested in working with me as to improve their health and longevity.
Oh,
And
nice.
I like to make it fun. You
Oh,
know,
that's great.
I have delicious nutritionals because I don't like to swallow pills.
Oh,
So
nice.
I get
Oh,
help.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. This has been fascinating. Thank you. I appreciate
All
it.
right. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
As we wrap up today's episode, I have a special invitation for those of you who are ready to take the next step in detoxifying your life. So I've been where you are, overwhelmed and unsure of where to start. That's why I'm offering a 20-minute Unlock Your Toxin-Free Life call at no cost, where we'll start mapping out your path to a cleaner, healthier environment. But here's the thing. My availability is limited because I dedicate a lot of time to each person that I help. I can only offer these free sessions to the first 7 listeners that sign up each month. And if this speaks to you, don't wait. So this isn't just about getting free advice. It's about safeguarding your health and your family's health and even your pets. If you're ready to make the leap, go to my website, greenlivingnow.com, and click on the button on the right-hand side for the 20-minute call. Don't miss out on this chance. Let's start this journey together.